CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Juliet Mann.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. Liz Truss becomes UK Prime Minister after meeting the Queen.
European countries scramble to shore up energy supplies after Russia shuts down a major gas pipeline. A package of measures is due from the EU next week.
UN inspectors warn of a continuing nuclear safety risk at Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia plant and say Russia's occupation is unsustainable.
Hacking accusations. China says the United States is trying to steal personal data and information from a top space and aviation university.
And immerse yourself in the beautiful game. The Chinese football stadium letting you join the crowd from the comfort of your armchair.
The UK has a new Prime Minister, the country's fourth in 6 years. Liz Truss has been formally appointed by the Queen and will deliver her first speech as leader when she arrives at Downing Street any moment now.
She replaces Boris Johnson, who told the ruling Conservative Party to get behind Truss as she deals with a host of challenges, not least the soaring cost of energy.
Our correspondent Louise Jabarka is outside Downing Street, the official residence of the Prime Minister, and we can see her car travelling there, just moments away from her destination. But let's talk to Louise first of all. Talk us through what's happened so far today.
Yeah, well, it might be a bit noisy here. Obviously, the press have gathered, lots of people here, as well as Conservative MPs just over my left shoulder. Many of them, including some of those tipped for senior jobs, likes of James Cleverly, who's thought will become the next Foreign Secretary here in the UK. They've come to show their support for Liz Truss, who set off on that journey from RAF Norfolk in the west of London about 40 minutes ago, so she should be here imminently. There was a podium that was set up in front of that famous black door that was then taken away because the heavens opened up a short while ago with a lot of rain, but it has been brought back now. Now, in terms of what's happened on Tuesday, the outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson, he travelled up to Scotland in Balmoral Castle, where the Queen is currently staying for the first time in a break with tradition in her 70-year reign. The outgoing Prime Minister had to go there to resign, and the incoming Prime Minister, that's Liz Truss, who's now taken over the role, also had to go to be granted permission to form a new government. That's a 500-mile trip each way, and we know that they travelled separately as well. But that has now finished. She's back in London on her way to Downing Street, which we can see those live pictures. And if the weather does hold up, she'll be out here giving a speech, one that will be watched closely by people up and down the country, not just households worried about this cost of living crisis and the rise in energy bills, which she's promised action on this week, but businesses as well. Many of them worried about the impact that it will have on them. Some, the likes of pubs and others across the UK, saying the costs are becoming astronomical and unsustainable, and that many of them will have to close. There'll also be a bit more we'll hear on later today around cabinet positions and who she chooses around her, and given how close that leadership contest was earlier this week, the fact that she won by 57% among the Conservative members, around 160,000 of them around the country. That's much tighter than many analysts had predicted, so it means that the people she does decide to surround herself in terms of senior ministers will be watched very, very closely.
Louise, she's due at Downing Street in a moment. I'm sure that podium will be reinstalled and she'll give her first speech. Are we expecting that to be the moment when she says who's in and who's out of her cabinet? Or do you think she's going to say what she's going to deliver on first?
Yeah, well, I think many people will be looking for that help with their energy bills and essentially the cost of living. Inflation here is at a 40-year high at more than 10%. It's set to get worse. The Bank of England predicts it will reach more than 13% later this year, and US Bank Cities predicts it will hit nearly 20%, 18% they predict in early 2023. So getting a hold of that will be something I think that many people will be watching for. Households will be looking for direct help, and Liz Truss actually has changed her outlook on that at the start of her campaign to become the next leader of the Conservative Party. About 2 months ago, she said she was opposed to handouts, that there needed to be more responsibility with people and the fiscal budget deficit the country is facing. She's now changed and said that she will be offering tens of billions of dollars of support. We're expecting her new government to outline later this week. They will essentially freeze energy bills at where they are now, and who pays for that? It seems the taxpayer will have to foot the bill, and given the huge cost of the pandemic, almost more than half a trillion US dollars the COVID-19 pandemic put in terms of a dent in public finances here. So that will be one thing to watch out for. But more generally, I think who she chooses to be alongside her. Number 11 Downing Street, next door to the Prime Minister's official residence, is the Chancellor or the Finance Minister. It's widely thought that Kwasi Kwarteng, a close ally of hers, will be brought in, but the gates are just about to open now. We can see some police motorbikes there. They escorted her on that journey throughout the west of London, here to central London, to Downing Street when she made that journey. You could probably hear some helicopters above me as well. So her arrival is imminent within the next few seconds. Motorbikes pulling up just outside the gates to Downing Street, about half a dozen of them, and the cars are starting to come in now. So any moment now we'll see Liz Truss taking up her first day as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the 56th Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the third woman to hold that position, the highest political office here in the United Kingdom. All three of them, coincidentally, the Conservative Party, were from the Conservative Party. She's also on her way back from Balmoral, where she met the Queen, the 15th Prime Minister of the Queen's 70-year reign. But few would have taken up this mantle at a time of such profound challenges, not just with the economy that we've been talking about. There are the cheers. That's Liz Truss coming out now. Here she comes. She's just about to come over my shoulder. I'll move out of the way as Liz Truss comes up. You can hear some applause. Those are from a group around 11 Downing Street, some of her supporters. You can see some major members of Parliament here as well, and leaders of the Conservative Party. She's about to speak, so we'll have a listen to what she says.
I have just accepted Her Majesty the Queen's kind invitation to form a new government. Let me pay tribute to my... Good afternoon. I have just accepted Her Majesty the Queen's kind invitation to form a new government. Let me pay tribute to my predecessor. Boris Johnson delivered Brexit, the COVID vaccine, and stood up to Russian aggression. History will see him as a hugely consequential Prime Minister. I'm honoured to take on this responsibility at a vital time for our country. What makes the United Kingdom great is our fundamental belief in freedom, in enterprise, and in fair play. Our people have shown grit, courage, and determination time and time again. We now face severe global headwinds caused by Russia's appalling war in Ukraine and the aftermath of COVID. Now is the time to tackle the issues that are holding Britain back. We need to build roads, homes, and broadband faster. We need more investment and great jobs in every town and city across our country. We need to reduce the burden on families and help people get on in life. I know that we have what it takes to tackle those challenges. Of course, it won't be easy, but we can do it. We will transform Britain into an aspiration nation with high-paying jobs, safe streets, and where everyone, everywhere, has the opportunities they deserve. I will take action this day and action every day to make it happen. United with our allies, we will stand up for freedom and democracy around the world, recognising that we can't have security at home without having security abroad. As Prime Minister, I will pursue 3 early priorities. Firstly, I will get Britain working again. I have a bold plan to grow the economy through tax cuts and reform. I will cut taxes to reward hard work and boost business-led growth and investment. I will drive reform in my mission to get the United Kingdom working, building and growing. We'll get spades in the ground to make sure people are not facing unaffordable energy bills, and we will also make sure that we are building hospitals, schools, roads and broadband. Secondly, I will deal hands-on with the energy crisis caused by Putin's war. I will take action this week to deal with energy bills and to secure our future energy supply. Thirdly, I will make sure that people can get doctor's appointments and the NHS services they need. We will put our health service on a firm footing. By delivering on the economy, on energy and on the NHS, we will put our nation on the path to long-term success. We shouldn't be daunted by the challenges we face. As strong as the storm may be, I know that the British people are stronger. Our country was built by people who get things done. We have huge reserves of talent, of energy and determination. I am confident that together we can ride out the storm. We can rebuild our economy and we can become the modern, brilliant Britain that I know we can be. This is our vital mission to ensure opportunity and prosperity for all people and future generations. I am determined to deliver. Thank you.
Well, that was Liz Truss, the new UK Prime Minister, giving her first speech outside number 10 Downing Street. There she is, posing just before she enters those famous doors as Prime Minister for the first time. We heard in her speech that she had 3 early priorities for her time as Prime Minister. She talked about dealing with the economy, the energy and the National Health Service. She said she wanted to get Britain working again, working, building and growing. She also talked about transforming Britain to an aspiration nation. Well, let's talk again to our correspondent, Nuid Jabakal, who's outside Downing Street. So, Nuid, Liz Truss delivering her speech there. What did you make of it? Unfortunately, we've lost our connection to Nuid Jabakal outside Downing Street. No doubt we will try and speak to him again later in the programme. Well, let's instead talk to Mark Shanahan, who's Associate Professor of Politics at the University of Surrey. So, Mark, hopefully you were able to hear some of what Liz Truss had to say there. What did you think of this initial speech she made as Prime Minister?
Right. Well, it was a better speech than she gave yesterday. That was one thing. Yesterday, when she first found out that she'd won the contest, she looked incredibly nervous and was very, very tense. I think it probably worked for her, having the 45-minute drive back from Northolt into Westminster to be able to gather her thoughts and get ready for this. I mean, this is the speech every politician wants to give in their life. The one where they stand in Downing Street at the lectern with all of the cameras of the world turned to them and can set out their vision. Now, unfortunately for Liz Truss, it's got to be a very immediate, short-termist view. It's actually number 2 in her list of 3, which is dealing with the energy price crisis that is probably going to take up most of her time during her first days in office. But she kept the speech short. She's not a great public speaker, but she probably did as well as she could there. Now the difficult job begins.
Picked out 3 early priorities, as she called them. As you say, the energy crisis, obviously a key one. She also talked about dealing with the NHS, but also about getting Britain working again, working, building and growing, she said. How important is her finalising her economic strategy in the early days?
I think Britain probably thinks it is working. So I actually thought that one was ever so slightly disparaging. I mean, where has she been? Has she? The Tory party has talked about us having record employment, but Liz Truss seems to believe that the UK is not a particularly productive nation and could be more productive. It will be interesting to see how she makes that happen. Her idea is to cut taxes, to get away from the corporation tax rise that was due to come in and really to favour business. She is a free marketeer, which means giving private businesses much more scope to invest. That's quite hard, though, when we are taxed so high at the moment. So she will also have to look at cutting taxes from the historically high level that they are in the United Kingdom at the moment. Whether she's going to have the headroom to do that, if she's going to spend over 100 billion between now and January in ensuring that the lights stay on and that we can cook our children's dinners, and still find another 40, 50, 60 billion for tax cuts by reversing the national insurance tax rise that happened earlier in the year and by not raising corporation taxes, it's going to be quite some conjuring act if she pulls it off.
She also talked about severe global headwinds. How important do you think a foreign policy will be in these early days?
Her foreign policy is going to be very important. Ever since Brexit and coming out of the European Union, the United Kingdom has not really been entirely clear on what its place is in the world. It wants to be very, very close to the United States. So she will certainly look to President Biden and look at perhaps repairing some of the less than convincing relationship that was occurring while Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. She also has to repair fences with Europe, and the signs are not particularly good for that. If she wants to withdraw the United Kingdom from the Northern Ireland Protocol by triggering Article 16, which was something she talked about in her campaign, that could actually start a trade war with the European Union. And that is absolutely the last thing that the United Kingdom needs. Then there are the issues around immigration. Is she going to continue with Boris Johnson's policy of being very hard on refugees coming across the Channel, potentially sending them to Rwanda? Or possibly some of these culture war policies that we had under the last administration might be pushed a little bit further back down the queue while she does build some international bridges and tackle the economic crisis at home.
Mark, great to get your thoughts today. Thank you very much for joining us. That's Mark Shanahan, Associate Professor of Politics at the University of Surrey.
Well, as we heard there from Mark, foreign policy is going to be very important. And up until her meeting with the Queen, Liz Truss was Britain's Foreign Secretary. So she's familiar with international relations.
Our correspondent Sarah Coates looks at the international challenges facing Britain's new leader.
Britain's new Prime Minister faces a big in-tray on the home front, but there are also pressing issues overseas. Here in France, she's already been stirring controversy, making this comment last month when asked about President Emmanuel Macron.
The jury's out. If I become Prime Minister, I'll judge him on deeds, not words.
Truss's words coming after a number of issues between the UK and France over the last few months. Macron responding with this.
The nation that is the United Kingdom is a friendly, strong and allied nation, regardless of its leaders and sometimes in spite of and beyond its leaders or the little mistakes they may make in campaigning remarks.
Paris and London will be hoping that a new Prime Minister could be the signal for a new start to the French-British relations.
It's not a love relationship now. It's reason, sense, and not sensibilities. Then we have the ideal seen from Paris and seen from the other capitals in the EU is considering what we have to face, the challenges we have to face, the proper thing to do is to work together.
There's also Britain's relationship with the EU to address, the problems surrounding Northern Ireland's unique place as the only part of the UK that has a border with the EU still unresolved with Brussels.
I think the Irish question remains a very important issue for the United States in general, for the Americans, and for President Biden in particular. And he already expressed that very clearly. And I don't think either that the Americans want the Europeans, seen from the other side of the Atlantic, being enemies.
Truss's policy toward the world's second largest economy is also under the spotlight. The new British Prime Minister says she'll declare China as a threat, despite the UK Finance Ministry trying to encourage British firms to invest there.
How do you marry that with Britain's strong economic and trade relationship with China, something that her predecessors, most particularly David Cameron and George Osborne in the middle of the last decades, were rolling out the carpet to preserve and to enhance?
And with the war in Ukraine showing no signs of ending, the new Prime Minister has already said she'll continue to support Kiev. After the elation of being elected as leader and now installed as Prime Minister, Liz Truss faces the reality of governing at a time of arguments with Brussels, tensions with China, and war in Europe. Sarah Coates, CGTN, Paris.
Still ahead on CGTN, a nuclear U-turn. Germany delays closing its last 2 nuclear plants amid concern about energy rationing. There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliet Mann.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and the bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos and unicorn companies. Make sense of it all with global business, only on CGTN.
Welcome back. Just a reminder that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
In a race to secure energy supplies, both Finland and Switzerland have promised billions of dollars worth of financial support to domestic energy companies.
Meanwhile, France sought to reassure the public it was well placed for the cold months ahead, having filled up its strategic gas reserves. European energy ministers will meet in the coming days with a package of measures expected to be unveiled next week. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Alex Cadier, who is in Brussels. So, Alex, Finland and Switzerland taking action to shore up energy firms. Does this suggest a lack of faith in the EU to find a solution to this crisis?
Not necessarily a lack of faith in the EU, but certainly a domestic sense of urgency for Switzerland and Finland taking action to shore up their energy firms and doing a direct state aid support to those energy firms. Now, the interesting thing is that Finland, as a European Union member state, is doing this action as well, and you would expect member states to take direct action to support their energy firms, but it's certainly doing that ahead of time and not waiting for the EU to declare what it's going to do and what packages of measures it's going to deploy as well. Now, having said that, as I said, you would expect member states to do this. In the last few months, it could be said that the EU, or the EU would say that they have supported member states in doing that by keeping state aid rules relaxed. Those rules have been relaxed to help states deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, and they were not tightened after the pandemic. They were kept looser to help member states weather the crisis as a result of the invasion of Ukraine. So certainly the EU staying out of the way at the moment and letting member states get up with the job of keeping energy bills down and dealing with the energy crisis as well. So not a similar, the EU hasn't announced a similar package of direct measures yet, but certainly something to look forward to. On top of that, we are a matter of days away from an emergency meeting of the EU's energy ministers here in Brussels, where it is expected that they will most likely set out their measures as to how to tackle the energy crisis.
And they could be looking at a couple of different proposals, couldn't they? What can you tell us?
Yeah, well, the EU's Commission President Ursula von der Leyen hinted in a tweet yesterday about what those measures might look like. Now, you have to caveat all EU things with the fact that nothing is agreed until something is agreed. So these are just things that Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the EU Commission, would like to see done and is aiming to see done, but obviously an agreement needs to be put in place. One of those suggested measures would be a price cap on Russian gas. Forcing Russia to either sell cheap or maybe not sell at all, and also support to vulnerable families and businesses in that tweet by Ursula von der Leyen. And finally, financial aid to energy companies to help mitigate against volatile markets. So a very similar measure to what Finland and Switzerland announced today. So similar measures, but ultimately the goal for the EU is to decrease their reliance on Russian gas, and that was a point made by Kadri Simpson, the EU's energy commissioner.
Right now, at this situation where Russia is using their natural gas supplies as a weapon, we have to take care of security of supply. And that means that, some extraordinary investments are needed.
So much more to come in the next few days, but you can certainly expect some pretty drastic measures from the European Union to deal with an increasingly dramatic energy crisis.
Alex, thank you very much. That's our correspondent, Alex Cadier, in Brussels.
The German government says it will extend the life of 2 of its remaining nuclear power plants until spring next year.
The move delays a long-held plan to close down all of Germany's nuclear power stations by the end of 2022, with Europe's energy crisis prompting the rethink.
Our correspondent Trent Murray reports.
With winter creeping closer across the continent and Germany staring down the barrel of possible energy rationing, the government here is scrambling to try and secure alternative supplies. It all follows Russia's decision to throttle gas supplies on Nord Stream 1, Europe's main source of natural gas. And with the energy-intensive colder months just around the corner, Berlin has taken the nuclear option, quite literally. 3 nuclear power plants remain in Germany after a decade-old policy of decommissioning the country's fleet of what was 17 plants. Those final 3 were due to be mothballed in December, but now a U-turn, with only 1 being switched off at the end of the year and the other 2 being kept in reserve until April for emergencies. The Vice-Chancellor announced that after a so-called stress test study, the results showed that the plants could be needed to help stabilise the grid.
The right conclusion to draw from is that we should retain the option of nuclear power beyond the normal life of the power plants. We should put 2 facilities in southern Germany in reserve so that they can be used again or continue to be used if the situation requires. We must not deprive ourselves of this option.
The decision has caused tension within Olaf Scholz's government. Habeck and the Green Party, both fierce opponents of nuclear, have consistently argued in the past that the country should stick to its original phase-out timeline. But the pro-business FDP party says given the current crisis, now is not the time to be picky when it comes to energy sources. When former Chancellor Angela Merkel first announced the decision to phase out nuclear in the wake of Japan's Fukushima nuclear disaster, it was met with wide support across the German electorate. But polls show the mood is shifting. Just 15% of Germans now say that the remaining plants should close in December. That's according to a recent poll conducted by broadcaster ZDF. That same study showed that 41% of Germans say the plants should keep operating for a few more months given the current crisis, while another 41% say that nuclear energy should be used in the long term. Trent Murray, CGTN, Berlin.
Ellen Wald is president of the energy consultancy Transversal Consulting. Good to see you, Ellen. What's your take on Germany delaying its nuclear phase-out?
I think that this is a very smart move that should have been implemented a while ago. It really made absolutely no sense why Germany was trying to close down all of its nuclear plants while making itself more dependent on Russian natural gas, only to then backtrack and say not even open the Nord Stream 2 pipeline while still closing its nuclear plants. Now that the Nord Stream 1 pipeline is completely shut down by Russia, Germany really has no other options. I would say that they really do need to go even further and try to reopen some of those shuttered nuclear plants if they want to make it through the winter without freezing and having to shut down massive parts of their economy.
You say Germany has no other option. What about other countries? Can we see them following Germany's lead?
Yeah, I think that the other countries that have been planning to shut down their nuclear reactors, if they can extend the life of those plants, they should do it. Obviously, it has to be done safely, but if the life of those nuclear plants can be extended, this is something that they need to do because the fact is that there just isn't going to be enough energy. They're not going to be able to import enough liquefied natural gas to meet their electricity needs over the winter without without Russian natural gas. And these nuclear plants are there, and if they can be extended, then they absolutely should go for that.
Now, I know we've been talking about this on and off, but let's broaden it out and look at global energy markets and what's happening there. I mean, oil prices 4 times this time last year, 10 times 18 months ago. What's going on?
Well, I would say that with global energy markets, we're still in a period of very high volatility. We've been in a period of very high volatility basically all year, and I really don't expect it to change all that much in terms of the amount of volatility that we're seeing. The supply picture is pretty much, I would say, unchanged. OPEC Plus's decision doesn't really do anything to impact the actual supply of oil on the markets. So what we're really looking at now is the demand picture. Are we going to see higher demand in Europe for oil, particularly non-Russian sources of oil, because their power plants are trying to switch to use oil instead of natural gas? That could lead to higher demand throughout the winter. Are we going to see lower demand as perhaps the world falls into some type of global recession, and generally a global recession leads to lower oil demand? So it's really a difficult picture to parse, and I think that depending on what signals we're seeing from various places, oil prices are responding with a lot of volatility to those signs.
Oil prices are saying one thing, though. Oil stocks seem to be saying another.
Yeah, in terms of the stock price of oil companies, I mean, if you look at them in terms of trends over time, they've really gone up a lot, particularly those companies that are traded on U.S. stock markets. We've seen a lot of value go into these companies, and that's not surprising given the fact that the price of oil is a lot higher than it was a year ago. The question really is, if we do see a major drop in oil prices due to some kind of global economic recession, will oil company stocks also drop? And I'm not so sure we will because there's generally a recognition that the world does continue to need oil and does need more oil, although you never really know with the stock market. Things are very volatile, I think, and oil companies are not immune from that volatility.
Volatility is the word of the day, certainly when it comes to energy markets. Ellen Wald, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up on CGTN, the manhunt continues. Prime suspect in a stabbing spree is on the run in Canada as his brother is found dead.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The cleanup operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
The economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Robin Dwyer and me, Juliet Mann. The headlines again. We can ride out the storm. Liz Truss says she'll tackle the economy, energy bill and the National Health Service in her first speech as Prime Minister of the UK.
European countries scramble to shore up energy supplies after Russia shuts down a major gas pipeline. A package of measures is due from the EU next week.
International experts say the shelling at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant in Ukraine is a constant threat to nuclear safety.
A team from the International Atomic Energy Agency has been at the site. They say Russia's occupation of it is not sustainable and could lead to an accident.
Kyiv and Moscow have blamed each other for shelling around the facility, which is under Russian control but operated by Ukrainian engineers.
Let's talk now to our correspondent Stuart Smith in Moscow. So, Stuart, what were the main findings of this report?
Well, these are the people responsible for nuclear safety around the world, and as such, they always said they weren't qualified to make a decision on as to who is doing the shelling. That's frustrated some in Russia. We'll come back to that. But the main line from the report is that extensive damage has been done to the nuclear power plant, but not so much damage, at least not in the right places, that jeopardise the radioactive situation there. There are no readings above normal, although sites where both used fuel is stored and where new fuel ready to be put into the reactors is stored have both suffered damage to their buildings, and that's highlighting the concern by the International Atomic Energy Agency expressed in this report that continued shelling could indeed pose a radiological threat. In the report, the employees of the IAEA outlined several measures which could be taken, including, of course, stopping the shelling itself. But in addition, they suggest taking such action as removing the military vehicles and equipment from the site that could potentially cause problems in the event of a safety situation. Currently, there are vehicles there, the IAEA says, that are not meant to be in there, and that if they stay in that location could present a hazard should something go wrong. They also suggest that the staff are exhausted, the Ukrainian staff exhausted from continual operation, and that they need to receive help. Otherwise, there's the potential for human error as the nuclear power plant continues to operate. They say in particular there is a concern that the power source which brings energy to the power plant so that it can run is under danger, as well as the plant itself, and steps need to be taken to make sure the power supply is unaffected by any military activity. In addition, they say that there should be measures taken to improve communications between the power plant and the rest of Ukraine, as well as the United Nations, and some kind of route to demilitarized route from Kiev to the power plant should be arranged. All of this to try to make that situation that little bit safer.
So, Stuart, has there been any response to this from Moscow or from elsewhere?
Well, ahead of the report, the Kremlin this morning in Moscow did give an announcement about what it expected. Dmitry Peskov, the president's press secretary, said he expects the truth from the IAEA mission, and also a statement of the real state of affairs at the nuclear power station. The Kremlin hasn't commented yet, but we have had some reaction from senior officials. One high-level senator saying that he is disappointed that there was no blame attributed to the damage. Of course, Russia and Ukraine both blaming each other for shelling. He said the report provided no new information. As to the recommendations about some kind of safety zone in and around the plant, well, it wasn't outlined exactly what that would mean, and Russia's permanent representative representative to the United Nations suggests without that kind of detail, it doesn't imply that Russia needs to take any action, because throughout all of this, remember, Russia insists by having a presence there at the plant, it says the situation for the employees and the plant is better, that it provides safety. And so it looks like so far, based on Russian reaction, disappointment, no blame was attributed to Ukraine, which is what the Kremlin says is responsible for the damage, but also that there's nothing in this report that suggests Russia needs to change what it's doing.
Stuart, thank you very much. That's our correspondent, Stuart Smith, in Moscow.
US President Joe Biden says Russia should not be designated a state sponsor of terrorism, despite calls from Ukraine. Some lawmakers in Washington have also called for Russia to be reclassified as a nation backing terrorist activity after it invaded Ukraine earlier this year. But Biden told reporters at the White House his answer to the proposal was no. That's been welcomed by the Kremlin, who described the possible change as monstrous.
Torrential rain has left many parts of India's tech capital, Bengaluru, underwater for a second day, with some workers resorting to commuting by tractor. There's been widespread damage and power cuts, and the city's water supply has been disrupted. Authorities say that since the start of June, the city has received over 160% more rainfall than normal.
Firefighters in China are working to evacuate thousands of people from a mountainous region in Sichuan after the province's biggest earthquake there in 5 years. At least 66 people were killed when the magnitude 6.8 quake struck on Monday. The government's created an emergency fund of $22 million. Tens of thousands of tents, quilts and cots are being sent to the affected area.
Police in Canada say one of the brothers suspected of stabbing 10 people to death in the province of Saskatchewan has been found dead.
The body of Damien Sanderson was discovered in the Indigenous community of James Smith Cree Nation, where most of the victims lived. His brother is believed to be on the run. Our correspondent Dan Williams is in Regina, Saskatchewan. Dan, what have the police had to say about this?
Yeah, hundreds of police have now joined in this manhunt as they search for Miles Sanderson. It really has, as you can imagine, shocked this area. This manhunt now entering a third day. As you say, they did then find the body of Damien Sanderson. His body found on Monday in James Smith Cree Nation Reserve. His body found with injuries, according to police. Also, we understand those injuries were not self-inflicted, again, according to police reports. And his body was found, as I say, up towards where the majority of these victims from this mass stabbing attack were found. Now, it comes, of course, following this chain of events that unraveled on Sunday, when some 10 people we now know were stabbed to death. A further 18 people were injured, and of course at this time the police are not giving a motive. That motive for what sparked this attack still very much unclear here.
Dan, you say the manhunt's into day 3. So what's happening now when it comes to Miles Sanderson?
So, as I say, yeah, very much hundreds of police now really focusing their efforts in trying to locate Miles Sanderson. He was last seen in a black Nissan Rouge here in Regina, which is that location around about 11:40 on Sunday. So he hasn't been at least officially spotted since that point in time. And police also saying that he too may have sustained injuries as well, and maybe seeking out some kind of medical care. Now, local reports say that Miles Sanderson is known to them. According to local reports, the Parole Board of Canada reportedly showing that he has some 59 convictions against his name dating back some 2 decades. I've been walking around the community here. I can tell you this is a community in shock. There, a real sense of unease, going about its business pretty much, but those that I've spoken to say that they won't be able to rest until this final suspect is now caught.
Dan Williams, thank you for the update.
Chinese authorities say the United States carried out a series of cyber attacks on one of its top space research institutions. A statement issued by China's main cybersecurity agency accuses the US of conducting more than 10,000 attacks on various institutions over recent years. The United States has made a number of similar accusations against China. Well, let's talk to our correspondent John Terrett in New York. So, John, claims of cyber attacks. What more do we know?
Well, exactly, Robin and Juliet. I mean, here's the thing. Beijing is hitting back, getting in the first punch, as it were, before D.C. does it again, because Beijing's been accused on many occasions of this sort of thing. And what's interesting about this, what is new about this, is that Beijing is these days being very specific about the people it holds responsible for these cyber attacks or hacks or snooping. And it is the NSA, which is the National Security Agency, based in a huge black glass building in Fort Meade in Maryland, not far from Washington, D.C. Beijing says that it hacked a university, which is in the city of Shan. Now, you know Shan because that's where the terracotta warriors who guard the first emperor of China are, a world-famous tourist attraction. It's the Northwestern Polytechnical University, and the thing about it is it has a specialty division in aeronautics and space research, and that is the issue. And in fact, the Chinese go even further. They say that a division of the NSA called the Office of Tailored Access is responsible for this hack or cyber interference or snooping, whatever you want to call it. Now, China's National Computer Virus Emergency Response Center says that the attack happened in June of this year and that the NSA has made 10,000 what it calls vicious cyber attacks in recent years, gaining 140 gigabytes of what it calls great value information. Now, the State Department and the NSA don't comment on these things, so no comment despite trying to reach out to them, but they do say there's a difference between cybersecurity and espionage. Make of that what you will, Robin and Juliet.
And John, money for chips, not fries, but chips, is beginning to flow.
I know. It's so funny because in Britain, of course, a chip is a fry and, you know, it always gets very confusing. We're talking about semiconductors, though, not the kind of chips you can eat. And this is the Chips and Science Act, which has had several names. I've been reporting on this program for a while. It was first known to me as Chips Plus. And then when they signed it into law, it became the Chips and Science Act. Basically, in broad terms, it's $50 billion in a much bigger package, which is worth almost $300 billion. And it is designed to build chip-making, semiconductor-making factories, equipment to do that, and research and development. And it is a direct attack on China, which is the most prolific of the chip makers in the world, ahead of countries like the ROK and Singapore and Malaysia, and also the USA, which comes in at number 5. Here's the amount of money that is being earmarked now. We know what it is: $28 billion for manufacturing, assembly, packaging, and shipping, $10 billion to upgrade old-style chips that you can't get out of, cars and telephones and things like that very easily. So you can update them electronically, or maybe you can slip a new one in. It doesn't blow the whole system. And $11 billion for research and development. We know this because Gina Raimondo told us. Who is she? She's the Commerce Secretary of the United States, who's been giving an interview today to the New York Times. She says the window for getting the money will be open in February, so the chip-making companies of America should have their documentation ready for February of next year, and she thinks the money could be flowing by springtime, so that will be March, April or May of next year. Guys?
John, thank you very much. That's our correspondent, John Terrett in New York.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Satellite communications, but no 5G. Huawei unveils its new smartphone and its solution to US tech restrictions.
Soaring energy prices, surging inflation, strained supply chains. As costs spiral and goods run short, people are feeling the heat. Join us for a special new series, Crunch Time, starting August the 1st, here on CGTN.
Welcome back. Businesses in Chengdu are feeling the brunt of consecutive coronavirus outbreaks, as well as summer power shortages.
Now, with the city under lockdown, factories are looking for ways to operate while staying COVID safe. CGTN's Nicole Ng reports.
They say you should keep work and life separate, But special circumstances call for special measures, like what's been dubbed production bubbles in Sichuan's factories.
Last week, when it was announced that Chengdu would go into lockdown, workers here at the Bosch plant were given the option to move on site. Offices were converted into living spaces, subsidies were offered, and also that the factory could continue operating 24 hours a day.
Deciding to stay open was easy. The company supplies big car makers like Tesla and BMW. The challenge was how to set it up.
Through testing, providing accommodation, food, and purchasing other materials, we can ensure that if employees are inside, it's actually safer than being outside. We gave the entire second floor to our frontline production employees and gave them tents, electronics, toiletries, and so on, so they have everything they need.
Over 200 workers decided to stay, among them Wang Lihua and his partner.
When the company doesn't disappoint its employees, employees also have the obligation and the responsibility to do something for the company. So we've done a good job in this regard.
Bosch isn't the only company grappling with operations amid an outbreak. The government says big names like Intel and Walmart have also set up bubbles and asked for help with transport and logistics.
When this outbreak began, we worked with the relevant departments to get permission for vehicles to cross provincial borders. This enabled companies to deliver their goods to the coastal cities, helping stabilize supply chains and production.
Much needed stability in times of uncertainty, as outbreaks continue to shake up life as we know it. Nicole Ng, CGTN.
Chinese tech giant Huawei has unveiled its new Mate 50 series smartphone.
It lacks a 5G mobile connection because of US sanctions that restrict its access to advanced semiconductors. But it can be linked to China's own navigation satellite system, Beidou, which allows users to send messages and their location data if there's no local mobile network service.
In the past 70 years, satellite communications have been mainly used in professional fields and terminals. It was difficult for ordinary users to obtain satellite communication services. We now have the world's first smartphone that supports Beidou satellite messaging. Our new smartphone is capable of sending location and trajectory map when users are in the desert, on the sea, or in the mountains, where there's no ground or wireless network.
Japan's currency, the yen, has plunged to its lowest level against the dollar for 24 years. It comes as US and European funds continue to bet on the country's loose monetary policy. The yen fell below 142 to the dollar in afternoon trading, the lowest it's been since August 1998.
Lufthansa pilots have called off planned strike action for this week after their union said they'd reached a last-minute pay deal with the airline. Passenger and cargo pilots had been due to strike for 2 days, starting on Wednesday. The strike last week caused disruption to thousands of passengers. The union said a core agreement had been reached, which would be developed over the coming days.
Credit Suisse is to sell its offshore trust business as part of a shake-up under new management. The troubled Swiss lender is cutting back on its investment banking division amid a new clampdown on offshore accounts by EU governments. The group says it's found buyers for its operations in Guernsey, Singapore, the Bahamas and Liechtenstein.
Volkswagen has announced plans to float sports car brand Porsche in what could become one of the world's largest listings. The German carmaker published its intention to hold an initial public offering in late September or early October, subject to further market developments. Investors expect a valuation of between $65 and $80 billion.
Beijing's Workers' Stadium is one of the most famous landmarks in the city.
Right now, it's under renovation, and the plan is to add more digital technology to make it China's first stadium that embraces the metaverse.
Our correspondent Ning Hong reports.
Beijing Workers' Stadium has been under renovation for nearly 2 years, and a model of the renovated stadium was showcased at the 2022 China International Fair for Trade and Services in Beijing.
After the renovation, the stadium will keep its elliptical shape, and the external facade will remain unchanged. Inside the stadium, it will become an international professional soccer field. The renovation will not only bring new vitality to the stadium, but also empowers the zone as Beijing's biggest city park complex. We have parks, gardens, lakes over here, and also a 200,000 square meters commercial zone, which directly lead to the 2 subways over here.
The stadium is also adding more tech elements. It's called the GTverse, a metaverse project that aims to provide an immersive digital experience for visitors at the new Beijing Workers' Stadium.
While the Beijing's Workers' Stadiums have provided audience an alternative solution to enjoy soccer game in the future, and not just sitting in front of TV. People could enjoy the soccer games in the future in VR or in augmented reality.
To achieve that, a super cloud network is being established in the stadium, including a private 5G network and hybrid cloud computing infrastructure.
Our customers will experience a variety of IP, activities, fans, avatars, of course, traffickers. So this is an operating-oriented metaverse. It will enable our consumers and our business partners in Gongti area to experience a super location-based cloud network.
GTverse is working with China Mobile, one of the largest 5G operators in China, and Qualcomm, the world's leading chip manufacturer, to build this ambitious project.
So during the first stage, we will provide the XR enhanced service in all the 70 boxes in our Gongti area. So that means over 1,000 XR devices will be alive next year. But our plan is by using the mobile operators' public network and the low-cost XR terminals, we will enable every visitor to experience XR services in Gongti in not far future.
From headsets to digital icons, many tech companies have showcased their metaverse projects at China International Fair for Trade and Services. Visitors to Beijing's Workers' Stadium will experience the immersive metaverse by as early as next year. Ning Hong, CGTN, Beijing.
The headlines again. Liz Truss says she will tackle the economy, energy bills and the National Health Service in her first speech as Prime Minister of the UK.
I am confident that together we can ride out the storm. We can rebuild our economy and we can become the modern, brilliant Britain that I know we can be.
European countries scramble to shore up energy supplies after Russia shuts down a major gas pipeline. A package of measures is due from the EU next week.
And UN inspectors warn of a continuing nuclear safety risk at Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia plant and say Russia's occupation is unsustainable.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
More on all our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all the team here in London, goodbye.
Bye.